Wyoming Territory, 1883. The woman stumbled through the rising morning dust and collapsed right at the edge of his wooden gate, her dress torn, lips cracked, and eyes wide with fear like she had been running for days. Jackson Zeller had just stepped out of the barn, one hand holding a saddle, boots still damp from the creek, when he saw her crash down at the edge of his property. He dropped the saddle without thinking. "Hey, hey," he crossed the yard in long strides, kneeling beside her. "You do not have to run anymore," he said, voice low, steady, as he brushed back a strand of hair from her dirt-streaked cheek. She blinked up at him, breath jagged in her throat. "Please, do not send me back." "I am not sending you anywhere," he said. Her fingers curled into the dirt like she needed to hold onto something real. He saw the blood on her sleeve, the way her left ankle bent wrong. She had not just been running, she had been hunted. He scooped her up gently. She was light, too light, and she did not fight him. Her head rested against his chest, her breath warm through his shirt. Inside the cabin, he laid her on the cot in the corner. The room smelled of pine wood and smoke. He brought water, then a clean cloth, dipping it into the tin basin and wringing it slow. She flinched when he touched her arm. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, his voice calm, her eyes searched his. I did not know where else to go. "You came to the right place," he said. "What is your name?" She hesitated. Selene Monroe." He nodded once. "Jackson Zeller." She looked around the room, then down at herself, like suddenly remembering the state she was in. "I did not mean to fall apart at your doorstep." "You did not fall apart," he said. "You held on long enough to make it here. That counts for something." He cleaned the cut on her arm, then wrapped it with a strip of torn sheet. Her ankle was swollen but not broken. He wrapped that too, careful not to make her flinch again. Afterward, she sipped the water he brought and let her head rest back against the pillow. Her voice was soft when she finally asked, "Is this place safe?" "As safe as it gets," he said. "There is no one for miles." That night, she slept on the cot near the fire. Jackson stayed in the chair, gun across his lap, in case whoever chased her was still out there. The next morning, she tried to stand. He caught her before she could fall. "You are not strong enough yet," he said. "I cannot stay here. If they find me—" "Who is they?" She looked away. He stepped back, gave her space. "You do not have to tell me. But you do not need to run anymore." Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears back. "I have 2 daughters, Phoebe and Pearl. They are 5 and 7. Jackson's breath caught. "Where are they?" "In Kansas. I left them with a friend. I had to. I thought if I led him away, if he thought I was dead, he would stop looking." "Who?" "My husband," she said, voice shaking. "He is not a man anymore, just something dark. I took the girls and ran when he raised his hand one too many times. He found us once already. I had no choice." Jackson swallowed hard. "You did what you had to." "I just want them back," she said. "I just want to be their mother again." "You will," he said. "You will get them back." Selene stayed for a week, slowly gaining strength, her bruises fading, her eyes clearing. Jackson gave her space, but not distance. He built a rail for her to steady herself on when she walked. He made her coffee in the mornings, watched her smile return in small pieces. One night, the wind howled outside and the fire crackled warm in the hearth. She sat beside him at the table, hands curled around a tin mug. "You are not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "Men like him," she said quietly. "I thought that was all there was." He looked at her. "There are good men, Selene. We are just quieter." She watched him for a long time. "You are the first man I ever felt safe with." He did not answer right away. He just reached across the table and brushed his fingers over hers. She did not pull away. The next morning, she stood at the gate where she had once fallen, the sunlight catching the gold in her hair. Jackson came up beside her. "I need to go to Kansas," she said. "I need to bring them home," he nodded. "You will not go alone." She turned to him. "You would come with me." He looked at her steady. "You do not have to run anymore, Selene, not from him, not from anything. I am with you now." Her eyes softened, and for the first time since she arrived, she smiled without effort. "Then let us bring them home," she said, and they did. The train pulled into Dodge City 2 days later, brakes screeching against metal, smoke curling into the sky like the tail of something restless. Jackson stepped down first and offered Selene his hand. She took it, the weight of her worn traveling skirt brushing the tops of her boots as she followed him onto the platform. She'd said her daughters were staying with a woman named Alma Bixby, a widow who ran a boarding house east of the river. They didn't speak much on the ride, too much noise. Too many eyes, but Jackson had noticed the way Selene's hands stayed clenched in her lap, knuckles white, her jaw locked like she was bracing for something to strike. Now, standing in a town full of Boothiels and voices, she looked smaller than she had back at the cabin. He stayed close without crowding her. She didn't need guarding, just someone who wouldn't let go. "Do you remember the way?" he asked, his hat drawn low against the wind. She nodded once. "It's 3 blocks south, then past the livery. The house with the white picket fence and the lilac bush. You sure she's still there? Alma doesn't have any place else to go. She'd stay put." They walked without hurry. The streets were busy, wagons rolling by, men calling to one another from storefronts. A woman scrubbed the front steps of a saloon with her skirts hitched above her knees, and the smell of livestock drifted in from somewhere nearby. Selene kept her eyes forward, her pace steady. They reached the fence before noon. The lilac bush was bare now, its branches clawing at the sky, but the house stood just as Selene remembered, white paint flaking, but clean, windows curtained. She held the gate latch for a long moment, her breath shallow. "Want me to knock?" Jackson asked. "No," she said. "I need to do it." She stepped up to the door, lifted her hand, and knocked twice. A moment passed. Then another. The door opened. A girl with pale brown hair and a freckled face peeked out. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her eyes widened. "Phoebe," Selene breathed. The girl stared, then turned and ran back inside. "Mama," she cried, voice high and disbelieving. Another child dashed to the doorway, smaller, darker curls bouncing as she skidded to a stop. "Mama," Selene dropped to her knees as both girls charged into her arms. She clutched them close, burying her face in their hair, her body trembling. Alma Bixby appeared behind them, her face lined but kind. "I told them you'd be back," she said softly. Selene looked up, eyes wet. "Thank you for keeping them safe." "I'd do it again," Alma said. "But you can't stay here. Word is he's come through twice asking after you. I didn't tell him a thing, but he's been sniffing." Selene stood, one hand still resting on Phoebe's back. "We're heading west. I have a place now." Alma looked at Jackson, then back at Selene. "With him?" Selene nodded. Alma gave her a long, measuring look. "He got quiet hands, that one. That's what you need." Selene turned to her daughters. "Go pack your things, just what you need. We're going home." The girls ran back inside, and Jackson stepped up beside her. "You ready?" he asked. "Almost," she said. "I need to go to the courthouse before we leave. I want it in writing. I want him to have no claim." Jackson didn't ask how. He just said, "Then we'll do it." The clerk at the courthouse was a thin man with a nervous blink, but he understood the weight behind Selene's words. She had proof, bruises faded but visible, a letter from Alma and her marriage certificate. Jackson stood near the door, silent, a steady presence as she signed the papers. When the man finished notarizing the dissolution, he looked up. "This'll be binding." "He can't touch the girls again." "He never will," she said. They left Dodge City late that day, the girls curled up in the wagon bed with a quilt folded beneath them. Selene sat beside Jackson on the bench seat, her hands resting in her lap, not clenched now, just folded. The sun dipped low over the prairie, and the road rose long ahead of them. Phoebe's voice floated up from the back. "Mama, what's our new house like?" Selene glanced at Jackson before answering. "It's quiet," she said. "There's a creek and a garden that needs planting come spring." "Does it snow there?" Pearl asked. "Sometimes," Jackson said, "but it's nothing we can't ride out." The girls settled down again, lulled by the motion. Selene leaned a little toward Jackson, not touching, but close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. "I never thought I'd get them back," she said, voice barely above the wind. "You didn't lose them," he said. "You just had to find the road that led you back." She turned her face to him. "I don't know what this is yet," she said, "but I want to see where it goes." Jackson met her eyes. "Then let's keep riding." They reached the cabin just after the first frost. The trail had turned stiff under the wagon wheels, and the evergreens near the ridge wore a thin veil of white. Jackson helped the girls down first, lifting them with practiced ease. Phoebe's boots hit the ground and she looked around, her brow furrowed. Pearl clung to her satchel, her eyes wide as she watched vapors rise from the horse's nostrils. Selene stepped down last, her fingers gripping Jackson's offered hand longer than necessary. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The wind carried enough between them. Inside, the girls wandered the space with quiet fascination, touching the table's smooth edge, peering into the hearth, peeking through the single curtain over the window. Jackson had cleared the second cot, laid down fresh ticking, and brought in a second trunk for their things. Pearl tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Is this where we're staying forever?" Selene knelt beside her. "It's where we're staying as long as we're safe," she said. Then she looked to Jackson. "And I think that's a long while." He didn't smile, just nodded once and began stoking the fire. That night, the girls curled up together beneath a quilt that still smelled of cedar. Selene sat at the table, legs tucked beneath her, mending a seam on Phoebe's dress by lantern light. Jackson leaned by the hearth, whittling down a piece of pine, shaving off curls that collected at his boots. "I never asked," she said, eyes still on the needle. "Why you're out here alone?" He paused, knife still in hand. "Didn't have much reason to stay anywhere else," he said. "I worked cattle in Colorado for a time, then Montana. Drifting kept me from feeling stuck, I guess. Until now," he looked up. "Until now," she set the needle aside, pressing her thumb to a tender spot on her palm. "You didn't ask for this." "I didn't ask for most things that mattered," he said. The wind shifted outside, brushing against the cabin like an old whisper. Selene stood and crossed to the window, tugging the curtain aside. The trees stood tall and still in the moonlight. "I don't sleep easy," she said, her voice low. "I'll hear things that aren't there, wake up too fast. Sometimes I forget I'm safe." "I don't sleep much either," Jackson said, "but I keep watch just fine." She turned from the window. "You always this steady," he set the whittling aside. "Only since you showed up bleeding at my gate." Her breath caught, not from fear, something else. She stepped closer, not all the way, but enough that the lantern cast both their shadows together on the floorboards. "I've never known someone like you," she said. Jackson met her gaze. "You never had the chance." Before she could speak again, Pearl stirred and let out a small cry. Selene was at her side in an instant, brushing back her daughter's hair, murmuring something soft in her ear until the girl settled. Jackson watched from the table, silent. When Selene returned, she didn't sit back down. She stood beside him, close enough that he could smell the faint oil from her sewing work, the cedar of her shawl. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked. "I used to think I didn't have a next," he said. "Now I think about fence lines, a second garden row. Maybe a school book or two." Selene looked at him, slow and sure. "You'd stay?" "I already did." She reached for his hand then, laying hers over it, palm to palm. Her touch was warm. "I don't know how to be loved right," she said. "But I want to learn." Jackson curled his fingers gently around hers. "Then we'll learn together." Outside, the wind settled. The moon climbed higher, casting silver over the eaves. Inside, the fire burned low, and for the first time in years, Selene Monroe let herself believe that forever might not be a lie. By the second week of December, the days shortened fast. The sun barely crept above the ridge before it began its slow descent again, casting long blue shadows across the snow-veined pasture. Jackson dug a trench around the north side of the cabin to keep meltwater from pooling, while Selene taught the girls how to string beans to dry along twines stretched near the hearth. Phoebe was careful with her hands, trying to mimic her mother's steady fingers. Pearl worked slower, distracted by the way the light caught on the glass of the lantern, but she stayed close. That evening, after the girls had fallen asleep tangled together beneath a patchwork quilt, Selene stepped outside to where Jackson was oiling the hinges on the barn door. Her coat was too thin, and he noticed her arms pressed tight to her chest. He stood and rubbed his palms clean on a strip of flannel. "I've got a coarser blanket you can wear when you fetch water." "That one's not made for Wyoming wind." She nodded, then looked past him toward the ridge where the pines stood black against the snow. "I was thinking today," she said, "about the girls, about what they'll remember. I don't want them to carry the past the way I did." He leaned a shoulder against the barn wall. "They've got more time ahead than behind now. That helps." She stepped closer. "I never asked, do you have people, family?" "Had a younger brother," he said after a pause. "He didn't come back from the war. No one left after that." Selene's breath hung in the air between them. "That's a long time to be alone." "I was used to it," he said, "but I'm starting to forget how that felt." She reached up and brushed a bit of straw from his collar. Her fingers were cold. I've seen men turn hard after loss. You didn't. He looked at her steady. Maybe I did, just took you to soften it. She didn't answer right away. The wind picked up, carrying the faint creak of the pines. Then she said, Phoebe asked me today if we'd stay through spring. I told her I didn't know. He didn't move, just waited. I wasn't being honest, she said. I want to stay. I think we've all started to belong here in some quiet way. I was hoping you'd say that, he said, voice low. She smiled, not from relief but from conviction. If we're going to make this a life, I want to do it right. I want to learn how to help with the land, not just sewing and keeping a hearth warm. You already do more than you know, he said. But if you want to learn fence line or seed rows, I'll teach you. Selene stepped closer until her shoulder was near his. Then start with the fence. Tomorrow, he nodded. We'll take it slow. Soil's still frozen, but we can plan it. She glanced back toward the cabin window where a soft orange glow flickered behind the curtain. They sleep easier here, she said. I didn't expect that. They know they're safe now, he said. That's all it takes. She looked up at him, her expression quiet, resolved. You gave them that. He reached out, brushing her hand with his thumb. We gave them that. Inside, the fire crackled low and frost traced feathered lines across the window panes. As they stepped back in from the cold, Selene paused long enough to remove her shawl and hang it beside his coat. Not separate anymore. Not just passing through. When she turned, Jackson was watching her. She met his gaze, and this time there was nothing guarded in her eyes. You don't have to wait on me, she said. He crossed the space between them and wrapped his arms around her, slow and sure. Her cheek rested against his chest and his hand settled at her back, warm and anchoring. I'm not waiting, he said. I'm here. They stood that way for a long time, the fire casting gold across the cabin walls, the quiet of the night wrapping around them like something earned. And outside, the snow began to fall soft, steady, and sure, covering the trail behind them. By late March, the ground gave way beneath their boots, softening into mud and promise. Jackson and Selene began laying the first posts for the fence she'd asked to learn. He showed her where to drive the spade, how to measure distance by boot length and habit. She watched closely, but never asked the same thing twice. Phoebe and Pearl helped gather stones from the pasture, carrying them in their apron folds and stacking them near the barn. The girls' laughter came easy now, untangled, unshadowed, and though Selene never said it aloud, Jackson could feel her heart ease each time they ran through the grass without looking back. One afternoon, while the girls were inside helping stir the stew pot, Selene planted her boot on the crossbar of the fence frame and leaned her weight into it. Last week, I stood here wondering if this land would ever feel like mine, she said. Today, it doesn't feel like it belongs to someone else. Jackson tapped the post firm into the earth. That's how you know it's home. Stops feeling borrowed. She looked toward the hills. You ever think about marrying again? He didn't answer right away. He set the mallet down and turned toward her. I never thought I'd have reason to, not until now. She met his gaze without flinching. I want to build more than a fence with you, Jackson. He stepped forward, wiping a streak of mud from her cheek with his thumb. Then let's build everything. They married beneath the cottonwoods before the leaves came in full. Reverend McGowan from town rode out with his wife in tow, who brought a tin of molasses cookies and a length of lace Selene wore pinned into her hair. Phoebe and Pearl carried wildflowers they'd gathered along the creek bank, and Jackson stood straight as a fence post when Selene walked to him with spring wind catching her skirt. The vows were brief, spoken with gravity and quiet joy. Jackson's voice never wavered. Selene's eyes never left his face. That night, after the girls had curled into their quilts and the guests had ridden home, Jackson and Selene sat on the cabin's threshold, her hand resting over his knee. I never pictured this, she said. Not the dress, not the flowers. Just you. He brushed back a strand of her hair that had pulled loose in the breeze. You're not the same woman who came through my gate. She tilted her head. No, he said. The one who came through was running. The one sitting next to me now has roots. She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. Then keep building with me. They did. In the seasons that followed, the fence enclosed a garden that grew strong rows of beans, squash, and late corn. Selene built a root cellar with Jackson's help, lining it with stone and marking each shelf with neat chalk. She taught the girls to preserve fruit and helped them stitch their first quilts by lantern light. Jackson added a second stall to the barn and bartered with a man from Rawlins for a second mare. The girls named her Bluebell. On warm evenings, they rode her bareback through the pasture while Jackson and Selene watched from the porch. They didn't speak often about what had come before. There was no need. Selene's shoulders no longer tensed at every sound, and Jackson no longer kept the rifle within reach at night. Trust had become a quiet rhythm between them, shared glances over morning coffee, the press of her fingers into his palm when the wind howled, the way she always waited for him to finish speaking before she answered. Pearl asked once while helping sweep the porch, "Will we stay here forever?" Selene glanced toward Jackson, standing in the field with a length of rope in one hand and a calm horse at his side. "Yes," she said. "Forever sounds just right." Years passed. The girls grew taller. Phoebe took to drawing everything she saw: birds, the slope of the hills, the way her mother's hands looked when pulling bread from the oven. Pearl liked to run, to climb, to chase rabbits through the brush, and come back with twigs in her hair and stories in her breath. Jackson added a room to the cabin, then another, until it no longer looked like a place where someone had once arrived broken. It looked like a life built slow and steady, with care and intention. Selene never forgot where she'd come from, but the memory dulled with time, like worn leather. It no longer hurt to touch. One spring, as they set out early to mark a new gate, Jackson paused and turned to her. "You've changed the shape of this land," he said. She smiled. "It changed me first." They stood there for a long while, the morning sun spilling gold across the pasture, the sound of the girls' laughter echoing from the trees. Selene reached for Jackson's hand, fitting her fingers through his like the final piece of something long in the making. And he held on, like he always had.